Hello everyone, my name is Jen and welcome to the Book Refuge. Okay, my camera is being crazy and I'm actually kind of nervous because isn't it funny how, if you do the payment contracts for your phone, because I film, edit, do everything I do for my business from my phone, okay, everything. Sorry, this could be a tiny little tangent ahead of time. And isn't it funny how I only have one payment left before my phone is paid off? And isn't it wild how whenever you're really close to having stuff paid off, then your phone just starts to fall apart and starts breaking. So you can't ever have it just be paid off and then go about your business. It's got to have something go wrong with it so that you're forced to upgrade even when you don't want to, it's so annoying. Honestly, I hate it so much. But anyway, you guys aren't here for me ranting about that. First world problems, at least I have a phone, at least it's able to do my business for me. So good to keep in check. But today we are going to talk about some dark romance books with Hard Won HEAs. So this is something I get asked to do now and then. I think I have made another video directly that's called this. But one of the things that I'd first like to say before I get into this list is that, in my opinion, one of the things that makes a dark romance work is when the romance is hard won, right? To me, that's what a dark romance is whatever twisted, crazy, dark shit that happens, we get an HEA at the end. That's what makes a fucked up story a dark romance to me. So in that sense, I feel like any romance that's labeled dark, is a hard won HEA, because otherwise, what's the point of the dark romance subgenre? But I understand what people were meaning with it. They mean one that's particularly the odds were really stacked against them, or they couldn't get out of their own way, or they're in life-threatening situations and it is a hard won HEA. So I realize what the point of the assignment of this is, but I just want to put out there that hard won HEA is why dark romance is its thing. If we're gonna torture these characters and put them through the hardest things imaginable, we better give them an HEA at the end, or else I don't want to read it, right? I'm get me out of this narrative if you're just gonna torture the people and they're gonna die at the end or something, right? But let's go ahead and get in. I have 10 different stories that I think have some of the hardest won HEAs that I've read. Some of them are a little bit softer than others, but we'll get through these. So of course the first one that popped into my mind was Still Beating by Jennifer Hartman, and I was lucky enough to get this one signed when I met her at North Iowa Book Bash a couple years ago. And this one by now I feel is almost infamous. The story is it is about these two who get kidnapped by a serial killer, and the serial killer's game is to make these two have sex. So they are technically both being assaulted, making the man have to do it. And if he can't rape the woman, if the man who is kidnapped can't rape the woman, then they're both killed. And they have to do this. And these two who get kidnapped are actually this woman named Cora and her sister's fiance, Dean. And she hates Dean. He was kind of a mean guy, or bully to her, and he's gonna marry her sister. And this story starts where Dean actually goes to pick her up from, I think it's from a bar, from a party, and when she's waiting for him, he comes up to her and they get abducted by this guy, and they get put in this basement and tied up, and they are forced to have sex with each other. And they are held captive for a very long time, and they're forced to rely on each other and make sure that their hearts stay beating, okay? And that's not even the darkest part of this then, because again, this does have an HEA, so there will be a time when they get out. But now what fuckery has been done to their minds after they were forced to do what they did with each other. Both what the hero was forced to do to her, and both what she was forced to endure, and how do they just go back to the lives they had before, right? And the answer is, they don't go back well. But I think that anyone who's read Still Beating, you may agree with me that that book, though it's not very long, like it's not like it's horribly long or anything, this book takes you through a journey that you just do not expect. And the characters aren't perfect, of course. There are mistakes that are made, and things are made harder for them by some of those decisions too, but overall, it's a very powerful story at the end of the day. Okay, then we have one that I love whenever I get to revisit it, and that is particularly Nino and Chiara from the Kimura Chronicles. So I actually have the individual copy of Twisted Emotions, but then I have the bind up collection, which has Twisted Bonds in it. So Twisted Emotions and Twisted Bonds are actually both about Nino and Chiara. If you're reading the series, it's books 2 and 4, and book 4 was actually just supposed to be a novella that kind of helped flesh out their story, because the end of Twisted Emotions does kind of just end, right? Like these two, they're forced into a marriage deal between these two families to forge peace, which the mafia world is in absolute torment, and to forge an alliance between the Las Vegas Kimura and the, is it the Familia or the Outfit? I never can tell. I think it's the Familia or whatever. But Luca and Remo make this. And Nino, who is his brother and his second in command, marry Chiara, who is a niece of Luca. But Chiara is kind of an outcast to her families because her and her sister, is it just one sister? It's one or two. Their dad was a traitor, and so their parents were killed because of this, and so they were raised by some family members, but they were seen as like some of the lowest of the low. And so Chiara gets called on to marry Nino, honestly because none of the other men are willing to offer up their daughters to Nino. They've only heard horrible things about the Kimura, and they assume whoever marries them will just be tortured. But you know what? They hand their daughters over all the time, so who the fuck cares? Well, Nino, apparently, though he is an emotionalist, like, psychopath, he has more care for Chiara than anyone she was raised with, which is just nuts. But she has a lot of trauma. She ends up, when she was a child, she was raped by the uncle who took her in. And so she's expecting, not only is she just traumatized sexually because that was done to her as a child, but she's now being handed over to this man who's expecting a virgin, or at least, like, that's what he's told anyway. The thing that she doesn't know is, like, the Kimura don't really care about that shit. Like, they literally don't even believe in these arranged marriages, but they're like, that's what these people believe, so we'll just give it to him. We'll take care of her, we'll put her in a room, like, she'll be fine. And when they have their, like, wedding night, Nino very quickly realizes something is very wrong. He's like, I know you're, like, she's scared of him, but he's also like, there's something else going on with this as well, because, you know, like, you shouldn't be this scared of me. And he realizes it, and he's like, who did this to you? And to me, this is the ultimate and first time I'd really read a who did this to you story, and it's why the Kimura still sits so high for me, particularly books 1 through 4 in the series sit so highly for me, though I have read many mafia at this point, because of that reaction. And also because instead of Chiara's virgin blood being on the sheets of her wedding night, Nino and Remo slaughter this uncle who'd raped her and show those sheets to the families. If you've never read Mafia, that might not have made sense to you, but that's how they proved the bride was a virgin in these stories, is her blood had to be on the sheets the next day, which is just wild. So yeah, but then he brings her back to Vegas with him and basically says, like, we don't have to be together physically. You don't ever have to worry about that. I'm not going to touch you if you don't want me to. But as Nino, you know, without even realizing it himself, I feel like is gentle with her and asks her questions. And because of his bluntness, because of, you know, him being neurodivergent the way that he just straight up will ask her things, and she starts to fall for him because he's treating her like his queen, you know, even though in the start he is still like sleeping with women because she is like, I don't ever want that. And he's like, okay, I won't put your face in it, but like, I'll take care of you and leave you alone. And as she falls for him, she realizes maybe that's not what she wants. So love it. I still do. Highly recommend, even if you don't want to read other books by Cora Riley, that you read at least the first 4 of the Kimura. I read the entire, you know, Bound in Blood series to get to those books, and I've had other friends who did it too and find it very satisfying. But yeah, I recommend those still to this day. Okay, another dark romance with a Hard Won HEA, which I'm very happy will be coming to wider audiences this September, is Manacled by Sin Yu, which is going to be reimagined as Alchemized when it gets published. But to me, Manacled is one of the most painful yet satisfying at the same time dark romances I've ever read. This is a Dramini fanfiction, in case you didn't know, and I do feel bad recommending this, but also not, because this is no longer available on fanfic.net until Alchemized comes out. So if you don't have it downloaded, I'm sorry I can't get it to you. I don't know where you will find it till then. Maybe someone on one of the forums out there has a doc that they'll send you. But this story is a hybrid between, like, what do we say? What's it said it is? What's it called? The Handmaid's Tale and a dark Dramini AU where Harry Potter is dead, Voldemort has won. Draco Malfoy is now what is called the High Reeve, which he's like the right hand of Voldemort. And Hermione Granger has lost her memory. She doesn't remember what happened in the war. She doesn't remember how all her friends are lost, and she doesn't understand why she's being gifted to Draco Malfoy and his wife to be bred to have more magical children. She gets manacled put on her so she can't use her magic, and she has also blocked off her memories from Voldemort, and there's something in her mind that he needs. And so there's this thing called like a thread connection, that if Draco is the one to put a child in her, he will then have like connection to her and then be able to get into her mind. And that's something that not only do they want to breed magical children, because that's been decimated through the war, but they also want the info that's in her head. So very dark, very twisted. Again, I don't know what will be in Alchemized, but I'm very excited it will be available to a wider audience in whatever form it takes, for sure. Okay, another hard one. Couple. This took no effort at all to pick this one. This was my favorite books of 2024, so you might know this. I would say the Frozen Fate trilogy by Pam Godwin. Truly and honestly, any book by Pam Godwin you can put in this, okay? She and Jennifer Hartman, to me, are the authors who write truly hard-won dark romances to me. All of her characters go through the absolute ringer. They live through the most vile things you've seen, and love is what wins in the end. And I love that. So Frozen Fates trilogy starts off with Frankie gets kidnapped by a crazy man and taken, like literally he is a psychopath and an absolute creep, and he takes her to his remote home in Alaska in the Arctic Circle, where 3 of his sons are forcibly kept there. They're not children, they're adults, but they've been there their whole lives. And Denver has taken Frankie there for reasons, like, we don't know what they are. And as Frankie is forced to unravel the world she's been thrown into, there's originally quite a bit of hostility from 2 of the sons, at least. One of the sons is a bit special and I don't mean like mentally, but he just is a more like, fuck everything. Everything's humorous to me, like play those mind games type of thing. And Frankie, though, is very smart and very adept at paying attention. And so she has to figure out what's truly going on in the dynamic between these 4 men out there. And there's also her husband who is looking for her, though they had a huge fight right before she was kidnapped. So he thinks she left him, but we won't count him out because he definitely shows up again in the trilogy. But this first book is them trying to survive being stuck in this remote location. The first 2 books are actually really survival ones. And then the third book, which is Heart of Frost and Scars, is them finally defeating the evil that's like holding them all back. And the HEA that happens, I won't tell you fully which people end up together, though there is more than one person in a relationship at the end of this, is so beautiful. Like, I'm rereading the third book right now because I'm annotating it, and it just guts me every time. Like, it just gets me so much. I just love it. Okay, next up, I wanted to bring back one that I haven't talked about these too much because I did get behind in the series a little bit, but the first 5, I think, are the ones I've read. And I think they're amazing. And I think each of them has just like gut-wrenching stories. So we have A Soul to Keep, the Dustwalker Bride books. And oh my gosh, these ones, you've probably seen the covers that look more like this. This is a special edition that is from, is it Faded Romance? Yeah, Faded Romance. This was gifted to me by one of my followers. But this series is these Dustwalkers who are kind of these like demons, these soul eaters. They've been known to eat people. And it starts off with our heroine in this one. Is it Rhea? I think, or Raina? What's her name? I think it's Raina. Rhea, I was right. Who, her village basically trades her to this Dustwalker. I think it's every 10 years in exchange. He shows up and does a protection shield to protect this small town from demons, because otherwise demons come out of these woods and they would just ravage the human population. And so Orpheus takes a human in offering into the Vale to live in his home. And those companions are there to ease his loneliness. And their lives have always been unfortunately short, though, for different reasons. I won't tell you why. Again, this wood is extremely dangerous. And there is something about Orpheus that, you know, she feels very imprisoned by him, but there's also something very lonely and sad and compelling about him. And the longer she's there, the more she starts to unravel like why he is the way he is and how he got this way. And we also start to meet more Dustwalkers who are all at different levels of intelligence and different levels of like their journey along the way. And we just start to find out about the lore of how things ended up this way. And it is a very sad and like lonely life that a lot of them lead, but very intriguing at the same time. Okay, then we have God of Fury. This was one of my favorite books of 2023, and this is an MM, which is a part of the Legacy of the God series. Now, I do recommend people read this whole series. I do, but I also know that there are quite a few people who've just read God of Fury, and I think you'll be okay doing that. I mean, it's true, but I also think, like anything, it's more satisfying to read them in order. But again, I also know people who just read this one or just listened to this one. The audiobook is out of this world, you guys. Like, you can't even. The performance of this is fantastic. Their duet narration, and they're just excellent. But this one is Nico and Brandon, and they are from like rival colleges that they go to, and Nico becomes fascinated with Bran and it starts stalking him, and Nico is a little unhinged. He has some issues, and so does Bran. And they're this toxic combination, but they're also so precious together. I love them so much. And I just have such a soft spot for this story. I think it's so well told. And their HEA, you guys, like, I bled for these two. Every time I read this, every time I revisit it, it just guts me, because the pain particularly that Bran has been through and the things that he's tried to hide, especially because his twin is a psychopath and he takes a lot of the attention, and Bran's been more of the calm, like level-headed one, or what we've seen. And so he's really hidden a lot of his pain. And when Nico gets a hold of him and just won't let go and is constantly like poking at that, he starts to get a bigger picture of what is going on. Now, this isn't a healthy relationship. This is still dark. There's still toxic aspects. But as the full picture of what happened to Bran comes into view, it just absolutely destroys me every time. And Rena can't handle this so well. I'm so excited for, there is a spin-off book from this. That is it Kiss the Villain is the spin-off of this one? I think it is. Yeah, and then Beautiful Venom is going to be her hockey romance, and that spin-off is going to be an MM romance too. And I truly think she may have found a niche for herself, because the way she wrote these two was amazing. Okay, then I have one. I haven't talked about this book in so long, but when I was thinking of Hard Won HEAs, this one definitely popped in, and part of it is that Maggie Cole tortures us with this book, okay? She absolutely does. This is a story that there is I believe it's like 21 years that these two are kept apart, and it's absolutely agonizing. So, Finn and the heroine's name, let me just look though, it's Finn and It's been a long time. So Brenna, they were in love when they were very young. I think they were just like 18, 21, something like that. They're very young. And something goes wrong, and Finn and actually one of his fellow like mafia guys, they get put in prison for, I can't remember if it's just drugs or murder or whatever, but he gets put in jail for a long time. Okay. And while he's in jail, some horrible things happen with Brenna. And when he gets out of prison, and at the beginning of this, well, I can't remember where she started, but he's been out for a while and looking for her, and he can't find her anywhere. Doesn't know what happened to her, where she ended up. And sadly, Brenna has been forced into a relationship where she's forced to be this guy's mistress. And he has done absolutely awful things to her. He's forced her to have plastic surgeries. He's sterilized her. He's kept her as his, like, fuck toy. Just completely done whatever he wanted to her. So her own body doesn't even belong to her at all. She's kept in slavery is basically what it is. And once he finds out where she's been and what happened to her and finally gets her, there's so much trauma to unravel. You know, what is even left of her? Do they still have a chance to love each other? They knew each other as children. He's been through prison. She's been through hell. Can they find their way back to each other? And also, who did this to them? How did they get separated like this? And who's responsible for forcing them apart all of this time? Like, there's just so many things. And this one is book 10 in a series, okay? Now, with this series, though, by Manacled, it's kind of split into two halves, okay? Like, the first 5 are the Russian side of the Mafia Wars, and then books 6 through 10 are the Irish side. And so, technically, I feel like you could start with Unchosen Ruler and read through the Irish side, because a lot of the books, like, overlap. That is something that I love and hate about Maggie Cole's books, is that she puts like, each book you can read as a standalone because she gives you the backstory. But if you binge all of the books, you will see some scenes of 5 or 6 times, right? So maybe it's better if you start with the Unchosen Ruler and go through, because a lot of people's stories, right, are overlapping, and there is a big mystery that, a big secret that's been kept throughout the lives of a lot of these characters, and a lot of it blows up at the end of this one that then heads into the next series of hers. But this book absolutely wrecked me. I think it's one of her best, like, written romances she has. And it's in my top ones of hers. Savage Tracker will still always be my favorite, and I love Unchosen Ruler, and I also love Deviant Hacker. But this one, for emotional weight, is one of her most emotional and best written romances. And what Brenna and Finn have went through, I don't think you can find many other as hard-won romances as this. So yeah, definitely very powerful. Okay, then I thought I would throw up, I'm not throwing up, but I throw up The Sinner's Duet by Sophie Lark. This, of course, is There Are No Saints and There Is No Devil. And this is about a serial killer who's an artist and an aspiring artist. And in the beginning of this story, there is this game of, like, dueling serial killers that's happening. And one of the serial killers is very messy and very much, like, is much more sloppy as it goes, whereas Cole Blackwell is very much more meticulous and detailed in what he does. And if he kills someone, it's for his art, as it were. That doesn't mean he doesn't kill some people for spite as well, but he's always kind of using them for a purpose. And this serial killer that he's dueling with is really trying to fuck with him, and Cole's like, I don't want anything to do with it. Like, I'm doing my own thing. This is for my art. Leave me alone. But this other serial killer throws our heroine, Mara, into his path. Literally kidnaps this woman, hogties her, and leaves her in the path of Cole. And he just is like, I'm not getting drawn into this. I'm not playing this at all. So he actually leaves this woman basically to, like, die, because he's not going to kill her, but he's not going to help her. He doesn't want anything to do with it. Well, what he doesn't expect is that she lives. And she's seen him. Like, she knows who he is. And the thing is, no one's ever going to believe her because she's this up-and-coming poor artist living in this house with a bunch of other people. And he's this very successful millionaire artist who is the upper crust of everything. So no one's going to believe her. But now she's caught his attention. So he didn't use her that night, but now that she's lived, he finds that fascinating. And she's now become his obsession. The journey these two go on, definitely toxic, definitely wild, but the way that Sophie gets me to a place where I like believe their love, that I believe their romance, I think that is crazy, right? Like, that is something that is very difficult to pull off, you know? So, thought I would share that. She actually has special editions of these coming in March, I believe. So keep an eye out for that. Okay, I was reminded of some of my favorite Gianna darlings after reading The Moon and His Tides. I've said that her biker books kind of go back and forth with me of like what I love and what doesn't work for me. But it's undeniable to me that this woman is still very talented. And one of my favorite Hard Won romances from her would be the anti-heroes in love duet. So when heroes fall, when villains rise, I think is just done so well. I really love the character of Elena and the things that she survived, the things she's made it through. And I really love Dante and his sexy twistedness that he has going on. And in the beginning of the story, she's actually his lawyer for an accused charges that she's brought in on the case. And she ends up like staying with him because he gets put on kind of like an ankle monitor and kept at home. And she, on his legal team, is like living with him to kind of keep him in line in a certain way. But of course, like, Dante's only going to be kept so much in line by her. But he's also very much into her and is kind of wooing her at the same time, which definitely is an ethical breach, but it's also, he sees something in her that he just wants so much. And Elena, besides being a very prickly heroine and actually has been a bit of a bitch in previous books, or so we've seen anyway, she has a lot of pain in her life. She has a lot of sorrow, a lot of things she survived, and hardening her edge is one of the ways she's done that, you know? And the way that Dante just wants to take some of the burden, the way that he wants to ease some of that for her, I just found to be very beautiful. Very beautiful. And I just love these two together. I think Dante is that edge of, he almost feels like, what's the way people describe that? I would describe him almost as like, would he be like a Rottweiler or a feral golden retriever? There we go. That's the one I like to use, because he can be very soft and jovial and kind, but and very loving to his people. Like, he's a very benevolent capo, but if you wrong him, he is not soft and easy in that way. And I think that is the perfect meeting for Elena, because he will, again, be kind of jovial at times, help her to loosen up, but then when it's time, it's like, okay, pull it in line, you know? So I appreciate him very much. And then the last book I want to throw out there. That's what I need to say. I need to say throw out there, because I keep saying throw up because I like throw up a picture. The last book I want to throw out there is Lothaire by Kresley Cole. And I'm actually like kind of sad there's going to be like recovers of these. I have liked some of the recovers that have been shared so far. I really have. But I'm like sad to lose this cover. Is that weird? It'll probably be a couple years before that happens, because they're only releasing like 4 or 5 a year or something like that. But anyway, this is Lothaire, the enemy of old. And he's been waiting centuries for his fated mate. He thinks he's found her. And it is, in his mind, this evil goddess who is inhabiting this hillbilly girl named Elizabeth. What he doesn't realize is, no, it's actually the human Elizabeth that is the one, and he just can't believe fate would be that cruel to him. And so he does some things that really put him and Elizabeth on absolute odds. Like, how can it ever work out between them? But, you know, fate she knows a thing or two, and there are some lessons that Lothaire has to learn. He thinks he knows everything, but even the enemy of old can learn something or two, and can learn something from a sexy little hayseed from the middle of nowhere who he thinks is just an inconvenience and is actually his vampire queen. So we'll see how that goes for him. But I do think this is a hard one, HEA, and part of that, I think almost any Cressley Cole characters can be put in here, because there's this thing that I call the like Cressley Cole syndrome, and she makes these type of enemies to lovers, that the wants and needs of each character are so completely opposite to their fated mate. You do not know how it's possible to reconcile those two things so that they can both have what they want, or if they can have it at all. And almost every time, every couple, when you see it, you're like, how can this work? And I think that is such a, like, it speaks so much to the talent that she has, that she's able to do that time and time again in her books, to set up a couple that you're like, well, this is it. This is the one where she finally can't have an HEA, because how can he want this thing and she want this thing, and it works somehow, but she does. So there you go. Those are 10 dark romances that I think have very hard-won HEAs. But again, I would really like challenge you to a lot of dark romances have that. And I would love to know some of your favorites. So leave me a recommendation down below for me and for your fellow readers here. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to my channel for more recommendations. I have an entire playlist of dark romances if you're looking for that. And yeah, we'll see you in the next video. Bye.